Hi, everyone. My name is Lee Appleby. I'm the Director of Communications here at DAS. We're very excited that you've all decided to spend some quality time with us this afternoon, taking time out of your schedules to learn a little bit more about the HVAC program for school districts. We've got a full webinar for you, so we'll jump right in just a couple of minutes. Just a reminder, if you're new to the Microsoft Teams live event function, there is a Q&A function. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, please type your questions in there. We will respond as best we can, either in the chat, live, or via email, or in our frequently asked questions section of our website. So without further ado, we'll jump right into it. We're going to start off with our Deputy Commissioner, Eleanor Michael.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us here today. We're really excited to kick off this second round of our HVAC Indoor Air Quality Grant Program for public schools. As Lee mentioned, my name is Eleanor Michael, and I'm a Deputy Commissioner here at the Department of Administrative Services. And on behalf of Commissioner Gilman, I wanted to welcome you all to this webinar. Thanks so much for joining us. So I was going to start off today with a little bit of background on the program. I'm sure most of you who are joining us today are familiar with this program already, but wanted to make sure that everybody was on the same page about how this came about and how we started. So as you know, the pandemic exposed a significant need to have modernized air filtration units in schools. The pandemic exposed a significant need to have this modernized air filtration, and just wanted to give many thanks to Governor Lamont, the legislature, and all of our education stakeholders for your support of this important program. The program was initiated in 2022 when legislation was first passed to create it and to fund the program. Then further legislation was passed this year in 2023 to add additional funds to the program. Our first round of grants was announced in the spring of 2023, and we're currently working on our second round, which we anticipate announcing grants in the beginning of calendar year 2024, and then we anticipate a third round in fiscal year 2025. So it is our full intention to get all of these dollars out the door. We will continue to hold rounds of funding until all of the money is spent down. And next, I wanted to just give you a quick overview of the HVAC funding that we have received. It's a little bit confusing, so I thought it would be good to level set kind of, again, how we got here. So in the 2022 legislative session, as I said, that was the first time that this program received funding, and that funding was for fiscal year 2023. So that year we received funding from two different sources, $75 million worth of bonding and $75 million of federal ARPA dollars, for a total of $150 million. Then last year, there was more funding added for both fiscal year 2024 and fiscal year 2025. So the legislature put another $150 million in for 2024 and $150 million in for 2025, which means that we currently have a grand total of $375 million in bonding for this program, $75 million in ARPA funding, for a grand total of $450 million in funding, which is a great investment in this program. Next, I just wanted to break down the funding for our first round. So again, I'm just reading this chart sort of top to bottom, left to right here. So as I said, for our first round, we had $150 million in funding, 75 from bonding, 75 from ARPA. In the grants that we announced in the spring, we only used $56 million of that bonding money. So we were very grateful. We were able to carry forward the remainder of that funding. We had $19 million left in bonding, and again, the entire $75 million in ARPA dollars, for a grand total of $94 million that we carried forward of those 2023 dollars. And again, to spend all of those dollars down. So that brings us to the HVAC funding for our second round, which is the round we're talking about today. Again, we have those carry forward funds, the $19 million of bonding, the $75 million of ARPA, for a grand total of $94 million that we carried forward. And then we have that FY24 funding of $150 million in bonding. So what we have for this second round of funding is $169 million in bonding, $75 million in ARPA for a grand total of $224 million. And again, you'll recall there is $150 million set aside for fiscal year 2025. However, we cannot access those funds yet because we are not yet in that fiscal year. So those are being reserved for the next round. And with that, I'd like to pass it over to my colleague, Melissa Conway, who is our Director of Special Projects, to talk a little bit about the application information for the second round.
Thanks, Eleanor. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for taking the time to join us today. I'm Melissa Conway, Director of Special Projects in the Commissioner's Office here at DAS. I'll be presenting on the next 10 or so slides to go over the application and grant process. So first, we'll jump into some basic application information. The legislation for this grant program was very specific that the eligible applicants are local boards of education, regional boards of education, or regional educational service centers. Similar to DAS's Chapter 173 grant programs, which is the priority list and non-priority list, the superintendent for the district will submit the application in Core CT. Applicants must submit one application per project. For example, if a district is replacing a condenser in one school and completing a boiler upgrade in another school, those would be submitted as two separate applications. Projects should focus on HVAC or other improvements to indoor air quality. We've received many questions about other improvements to indoor air quality, or IAQ, such as air purifiers. While we will consider these if they're peer-reviewed, such as by the CDC, DPH, or ASHRAE, we strongly encourage the application to address the underlying HVAC system. The CDC has highlighted that one of the foundational strategies to improving indoor air quality in a school is to ensure that the HVAC system is maximizing ventilation. Other improvements to indoor air quality are helpful, but supplementary to the HVAC system. You can find additional information on indoor air quality systems on the Resources tab of our HVAC website. Next slide, please. Next, we'll discuss out-of-scope activities. The first is routine maintenance. An example of this is replacing an air filter, but augmenting a system to allow for more comprehensive filtering would be different. This is an engineering effort where the system would have to be analyzed to determine whether or not it can handle the increased strain of a new type of filter. And also the fans or ductwork may need modification. Other out-of-scope activities include work that's otherwise eligible for a Chapter 173 grant and work on a facility not located in a public school building. I also want to mention that DIS will not grant funds to project or technology that is not supported by peer-reviewed scientific evidence. We strongly encourage you to submit information with your application as to why it's supported by the CDC, DPH, ASHRAE standards, especially if your project falls into the other improvements to indoor air quality category. As previously mentioned, we've provided resources on the HVAC website to provide more information on technologies that are peer-reviewed. Appendix G of the program guidance also has information on the ASHRAE recommendations. Next, we'll discuss the eligible project timelines. There are two timeframes that projects can fall into. Applicants can submit for projects that were already completed or projects that will be completed in the future. Despite the timeframe of the project, all applications must include all required documents, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. Pursuant to state statute, projects must be completed by the end of the next calendar year following the year of grant commitment. For example, if a district receives a grant commitment for a new project in March 2024, the project must be completed by December 31, 2025. There is a question in the application in Core CT in which applicants must select their project timeline. Next slide, please. As Eleanor mentioned earlier, there are two funding sources for this project, or for this grant: state bond funds and coronavirus state fiscal recovery funds, which is a source of ARPA funding. Applicants who successfully receive a grant will receive one of for their project, and the source will be stated in their notice of grant award. DAS will consider several factors, including an applicant's local share funding source, whether the project was already completed or to be completed in the future, the risk assessment, and others to determine the funding source for a grant award. Based on the determination of the funding source, recipients who receive federal funds will have additional terms and conditions and may be subject to additional audit requirements related to federal grant awards or grant award requirements. Next slide. The statute for this grant program requires that applicants provide their local share, which is calculated using the reimbursement rates. The reimbursement rates for this program are codified in statute and are the same formula as the priority list and non-priority list. DAS calculates these rates annually, and applicants are to use the general construction rate in effect on the date that their application is submitted. We've created an interactive Excel spreadsheet to help applicants identify their rate. This is available on the School Construction State Reimbursement Percentages page on the Office of Grants Administration website. So there are a few changes from the first round that we want to discuss. The first is that applicants may use federal funds for their local share. We'll give a more detailed example of this in the next slide. Next, the funding authorization letter is required for all applications. Despite the funding source for the local share, such as capital improvement budget, referendum, or federal funds, applicants will need to provide this letter to explicitly indicate the funding source, the amount, and the approval to use that funding source for this project or grant application. This will make it easier for DAS to match the amounts in your application and to process your application. One of the main issues in the first round is that applicants didn't include the cost of their project, or the total project amount was unclear and the local share amount was unclear. DAS cannot issue grants for projects in which we don't know the costs. Applicants will also have to submit a risk assessment questionnaire, which is available in Appendix D. DAS will use this to conduct a risk assessment, and it will also help us to determine the source of funds for your application, whether it's federal funds or bond funds. This is also required for federal funds. We'll also provide you with a formal notice of grant award with information on the grant award start date, end date, funding source, and other key information. This will also have terms and conditions, including requiring the applicant to complete quarterly reporting. We want to be able to track the progress of your project and to understand the impact that your project is having on your community or on your school. All awardees will complete these reporting requirements regardless of the funding source of their grant award. Next slide, please. So following the last slide, we want to provide an example of applying federal funds to the local share and the differences between when those federal funds applied in the last round of grant applications and when they apply for this round, the second round. So in the last round or the first round of applications, the federal funds were applied to the total project costs before the state calculated the local share. So, for example, if the total project costs were $100 and the district had $20 in federal funds, then that $20 would reduce the total project cost to $80. And then the reimbursement rate, or listed here as the match percent, is applied to that 80. So in the top row example, the state reimbursement amount is $40 and the local match amount is $40. In the current round, the applicant is allowed to use federal funds towards their local match amount. So, for example, if the total project costs are $100 and then the reimbursement rate is applied to that $100. In this scenario, the state reimbursement would be $50 and the local match would be $50. 20 of which would be federal funds. Next slide, please. Our next slide gets into the details of the application requirements and documents that need to be submitted with the application in Core CT. Districts must submit project costs, and this must include the entire project amount. This is entered into the Core CT system as the bid amount. Each project must also have a detailed project cost estimate, and it must equal the bid amount entered in Core CT. The cost estimate can be prepared by either a mechanical contractor, an engineering firm, or a professional cost estimating firm. Districts must also submit the local funding authorization letter, which I mentioned a little bit earlier. This letter is documentation showing approval by the local authorizing body of the local share amount for this project and is accompanied by supporting documentation such as the referendum or capital improvement budget. The local funding authorization letter must be signed and dated and certified by the town clerk. Next, the applicant must submit the 3 resolutions. The first resolution authorizes the application. The second establishes a building committee. And the third approves preparation of schematic drawings. All resolutions must include the school's name, the specific type of project, and the project name. They must be signed, dated, and certified by the town clerk. Sample resolution language is provided in Appendix C of the guidance document. Next, applicants must submit educational specifications. These must include a detailed description of the work at the specific school. They must be labeled educational specifications or ed specs on the top of the document. Accompanying the ed specs, applicants must provide the Board of Ed meeting minutes reflecting the Board of Ed's approval of the ed specs. The minutes must be signed and dated by the recording secretary or the superintendent if they were. And lastly, as mentioned earlier, districts must submit the risk assessment questionnaire, which is included in Appendix D of the guidance document. Next, we'll get into the application evaluation process. The 11 mandatory criteria here include the 9 application requirements mentioned in the last slide, plus DAS will also check that the application addresses indoor air quality using approved systems and that the application does not include out-of-scope activities. DAS will review all applications for those that submit the mandatory criteria, and those that successfully do will move into Pool 1 and will move forward in the grant scoring and award process. Applications that are missing items will move to Pool 2, and applicants in Pool 2 may have the opportunity to rectify their deficiencies in the mandatory criteria pending available funding. You can find more details on the evaluation and scoring in Section G of the guidance, as well as in Appendix B, which includes a copy of the evaluation rubric. Next slide, please. While the items in the last slide are considered mandatory criteria, these items here are considered scored. DAS may use the criteria here to score the applications if we receive more applications than available funding. These items are per state statute, and similar to what I mentioned in the last slide, the scored criteria are available in Appendix B in the evaluation rubric of the guidance. Next, I'll hand it over to my colleague, Yolita Lazowskis, to talk about the post-grant award process. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Melissa. My name is Yolita Lazowskis, and I'm the Chief Fiscal Officer at Department of Administrative Services. And today I will talk about the post-award grant process. Once your application is accepted, you will receive a grant award notice with the grant award amount, contract ID, project number, and a breakdown of the funding. Along with the grant award notice letter, terms and conditions with the essential processes of monitoring, reporting, and payment request process will be provided. The outlined terms and conditions are vital to ensure the funds are utilized efficiently and effectively. meeting the intent of goals and objectives. This includes the specific purposes of which the funds can be used, the reporting requirements, and the timelines for compliance. It is crucial to ensure transparency and accountability. Quarterly and annual reporting will be required. Regular and accurate reporting keeps our agency informed of your project progress. Through meticulous monitoring, we can identify challenges early on and take corrective actions to achieve your goals efficiently. The payment request process is a critical element for the grantee to receive a timely reimbursement. It is essential to submit accurate and detailed payment requests through the Core CT portal, adhering to specified guidances and timelines. These requests should provide a transparent breakdown of expenditures and align with the approved budget, maintaining a high level of accountability. In conclusion, we must approach the utilization of these funds in adherence to grant award notice terms and conditions with utmost diligence and responsibility. Thank you for your attention. And now let's move to the next slide, and I will pass it to Eleanor, who will address audit.
Great, thanks so much, Yolita. So after your project is completed, it will be subjected to the usual state audit requirements. So for those of you who are familiar with priority list projects and non-priority list projects, these will be the same requirements that you are subjected to for those grants as well. So you will be subject to audit by our DAS audit team on grant, and also to audits by the auditors of public accounts. And then for those entities that are receiving federal funds, there will also be potential for a federal review of records relevant to project completion and compliance with 2 CFR 200 procurement requirements. I also wanted to note, I saw in the Q&A that someone was asking if this webinar will be made available on our website. Yes, it will be made available. The PowerPoint will be on the website, and our program guidance is already up there. That's our 26-page document that this webinar is based on. So all of the information found in this webinar can be found in that guidance document as well. So next, I want to turn it back over to, I believe, Lee and Melissa, where we are going to address some of the frequently asked questions that we have already received on the program.
Thanks, Eleanor. That's exactly right. So next, we're going to run through some of the popular questions that we've received. If you have additional questions, put them in the chat or send them to the DAS Grants admin email. Our team is working to routinely update the FAQs on the HVAC grant website based off the questions that we receive.
Thanks, Melissa. I'll jump in with the first question. Can a district apply for a project again, even if they already applied in the first round?
Great question, Lee. Yes, of course. We understand the importance of this program to improving indoor air quality in school districts. And for districts that were declined in the first round, we highly encourage you to resubmit your updated application. Districts cannot resubmit an application for a project that already received funding in the first round.
Thank you. Another question we often get is, how do superintendents get access to Core CT?
So each municipality should have a Core CT administrator. This person is usually the town clerk or an administrator in the town office. And this administrator can create user accounts and create an account for the superintendent. If you don't know who your municipal core administrator is, please get in touch with our Office of Grants Administration team at dasgrantsadministration@ct.gov. There are resources for using Core CT on the Office of Grants Administration website. I just wanted to make sure I mentioned that here. And then I also want to mention that we recognize that only the superintendents have access to the application Core CT, but others from the municipality might be supporting the application or helping to pull together the application materials. For ease of access, we've pulled an excerpt of the application questions into Appendix A of the guidance document, and we encourage you to review all appendices and to pull all materials together before submitting your application.
The next question we have is, can I include 2 projects in one set of resolutions?
Yes, you can include 2 projects in one set of resolutions, but each resolution must include each school's name, the specific type of project, and the project name. For example, if a district wants to replace a boiler at school A, and it can be required resolutions must each include both school names, both project names, and must specify the type of project at each school. The resolutions must be signed, dated, and certified by the town clerk. And each project must have its own application, even if they're both included in the same set of resolutions.
That's great. The next question is there a maximum amount I can apply for?
Thanks, Lee. So we haven't set a maximum amount that a district can apply for, but we wanted to include a few examples here. So in the first round of awards, DAS awarded grants for projects with costs as low as $1,000 to projects as high as $16 million.
The next question we have is, are air filters or air purifiers allowable under the grant program?
This is a great question and a very common question. So replacement of air filters is considered routine maintenance and is not eligible under this program. But as I mentioned earlier, augmenting of an HVAC system to allow for more comprehensive filtering may be considered eligible since this is an engineering effort. Air purifiers, on the other hand, fall into the category of other improvements to indoor air quality and are allowable in this grant program under the statute. On that note, though, funds will not be awarded for grants that include filtration or purification systems that use technology that's not been supported by peer-reviewed scientific evidence. We provide the resources for this on the HVAC website, as well as ASHRAE guidance in appendix, or ASHRAE information in Appendix G of the program guidance.
Finally, we have a question on how does the reimbursement process work?
Thanks, Lee. And I know Yolita got into this a little bit earlier, but I can give some more information in this answer. So awardees will be provided a notice of grant award. And in that notice of grant award, there will be key grant information such as start date, end date, as well as the contract ID. Awardees will submit for reimbursement in Core CT using the contract ID and will attach the form listed here, the DAS 1046S, summary of invoices for payment request. This form is available on the Office of Grants Administration website, and there's also Core CT information and resources for how to submit for reimbursement on the Office of Grants Administration website.
And what deadlines are applicable to the program?
That's a great question. So applicants must submit their applications by December 31, 2023. We anticipate making grant commitments in spring 2024. As we stated earlier in the timeline, awardees have until the end of the calendar year following grant commitment to complete their projects, and that's per statute. So this means that if applicants were provided an award in spring 2024, they have until December 31, 2025 to complete their projects.
And that brings us to the end of our frequently asked questions portion of the program.
Thanks, Lee. So this is just a reminder that the application closes December 31 at 5 p.m. These slides will be available on our website as well as a recording of this webinar. And the links to the resources in these slides will be live links. So this one will bring you directly to the Core CT system. Just want to say thank you for joining us today. Our team has taken note of the questions in the chat, and we will review and update the FAQs on our website accordingly. We look forward to reviewing your grant application, and I hope everyone has a great rest of their day. Thank you.